and perhaps like when
A
you were
little bit.
born, and
Yeah.
just start off with a little biographical piece.
Okay. My name is Pat Capponi. I'm a psychiatric survivor. I've been in hospital about 7 times, 3 months, 5 months at a time. Diagnosed with depression. Come out of a family where there is a history of a lot of physical abuse, some sexual abuse, not toward me. Ended up in a Parkdale, West Toronto Parkdale boarding home, because if you keep going back enough, they call you chronic. And there were 70 people in that boarding home, and it was Dickensian environment. And it was through meeting those 70 people and through trying to understand how there could be such a poor house on a main street in Toronto got me. I said to myself I would devote a couple of years to trying to fix things. Either I'm a slow worker or a slow learner, not sure what. So that was about 30 years ago.
So what year?
78, 79 I came to Toronto. I was in St. Mike's Hospital for 3 months and 11 days. They said to me, we're going to send you to this house where you'll be taken care of. You won't have to worry about anything because working with people is far too stressful for you. So I walked into this building that was like a scene from hell. It was really astonishing. The hospitals didn't really look at these places. They were privately owned boarding home. People that were deinstitutionalized from Whitby, Psychiatric, Lakeshore Psych, Queen Street. Just jammed in.
And was it in the boarding house that you ended up in, was in this area in Parkdale?
Yeah, King and Tyndall. Yeah. So I was petrified. I'd been in a provincial hospital in Montreal called Verdun at the time. It's now called the Douglas. You know, they keep changing the names in hopes that they can avoid their past. But and when I was in the Douglas, before I'd been in the more middle-class psych wards of general hospitals, where there lots of action going on, sometimes not good action like shock treatment, but lots of action going on. Going into the Douglas, the Verdun, there was nothing happening, locked out of your rooms all day because it's not healthy to be in your room. So you went into a bigger room where people just slept on chairs all day and no kind of care, no kind of, it was horrible. And you didn't know how to get out. And the people there were, lost and aggressive. And I would wake up and somebody would be choking me like this. It was very heavy. So when I came here and St. Mike sent me to a boarding home, I thought, holy shit, they followed me from Verdun. I'm in a building with all the same people that I just ran away from. Which, I was judging on physical appearances, which I feel bad about now because I kept thinking they'll come and see that I don't belong here, and I was holding on to that little hope till the welfare person came in and looked at me like, of course you belong here. But after the fear subsided a bit and I was down on the front balcony, I met some of the guys who looked most fearful, who said, don't worry, we'll take care of you, and caused me to laugh hysterically because they were the ones I was most worried about. But they did. They watched out for me. I was safe, never, and not only that, but useful, because they would start to ask me, because a lot of them had interrupted education, literacy issues. How do I know if I'm divorced? Or can you write a letter to my mom, like this? Or can you stop those kids that are coming in the front door and throwing stones at us, like that? So the more they asked, the more I felt more who I was, or who I used to be.
Because you'd been to Concord, did you go to Concord?
I had been at Dawson College.
Right.
The day it opened. It was really cool. Had a lot of fun there. And Concordia for a year in English honors. Then I went to a group home, just because I asked myself, what the heck am I going to do with a degree in English? And I'd run into some kids when I was at Dawson who came from where now? It was a boys' institution, really a lousy, lousy, lousy place. And I really liked them, so I started something for them at Dawson. I got a place. They were happy to give me a place for them because it got me up there. So like kind of a house where they could hang, like a clubhouse. I really liked those kids. So I thought, hey, this is cool. I saw a job opening for group home parent in Summerhill Homes. Went for the interview, got the job. All of a sudden I had 17 teenage boys. I was 23. The oldest kid was 18. And I did that for 4 years, and I really, really, really liked it. And then went back into hospital, of course, and ended up in Toronto. One of my kids became an investigative reporter and wrote a really lovely thing for the Ottawa Citizen about on Mother's Day, about the difference I'd made in his life. So I was very thankful that I'd been a good group home mother and not a bad one. But it was, so coming from that, I had more going for me than the guys did in the house, who'd, you know, sometimes been scooped up as a 10-year-old and locked up for 20, 30 years. So I had more of a sense of what should be and what was appalling than these guys did, and tried to use that to motivate and get some change.
And am I right in thinking that you'd also been involved with student politics in like high
Dawson,
school?
In high school, yeah.
And
you've done some research. in high school, at home, of course, if you said anything, got the crap beat out of you, right? But in high school, in school itself, I was really not doing well. Failed grade 5, failed grade 7. Though they put me, I got a progress prize for getting a D. You know, that's how bad I was. So they put me in commercial, which was the dumb class. Everybody knew that, for 3 years. To get into academic stream, I had to go back and do grade 9 again. I was in high school a long time. Failed grade 11 because I was in hospital. And a teacher cheated to get me out. He called me and said, you know, you're never going to get out of high school with this bloody algebra mark, but I'm going to put you up. And he told me it. That was very, very cool. The only way I got into Dawson College.
doesn't happen anymore.
No. It was a very risky thing for the guy to do, and I really respected that. And Dawson, because you could choose what to study, plus I didn't have to go to classes. Actually, professors gave me A's to stay out of their classes, which was okay. So politics and poetry, that's what I was marked on. And it was really a good time. I've actually just recently, Courtney Pratt, who was head of INCO in Hamilton, I knew he'd worked at Dawson when I was there. I was a big fish, small pond, right? And I ran into him at a celebration for my doctor, who's also his doctor, GP. We had lunch, and it was really neat. And he's giving us a hand to get business representation on the anti-poverty thing that I'm at. And the whole Dawson football team, we used to do LSD and then go play. I didn't play football. I watched them. They meet every Christmas in Montreal. I've been invited there, so that's kind of neat. But Dawson, it started Dawson is students. That was the slogan. So I was hiring on the English department, you know. So student parity on all departments.
So what year is that? It's like 70.
First year it opened, 69, 70.
69, 70. Right.
So the same principles we picked up there, I use here. And Courtney is saying that the principles that he learned as a worker back then, he applies for his business ethics. That was pretty good.
Because it seemed to me that when you came into that boarding house, like you were saying, you had this political piece in terms of having been involved in politics, student politics.
Through writing too, we used to sell. At Dawson, the first year, we had a street paper that we sold on the street. Got me walking pneumonia from doing that. So I was used to.
And you had an education that
and I had the education.
Yeah.
So putting out the cuckoo's nest was a really, was really fun.
Okay, so that's one of my things. So can you tell us more about the cuckoo's nest?
Right. So I had these guys, right. After a while, when I started to relax and start to see beyond the physical, and got a sense of where these guys were from and what the hell they were doing. And it was rough, and it was pretty rough. There were very few women in the house, and most of those were over 70, right? So it seemed like people were coming and telling me the beginning and the end of these stories. I thought, what am I supposed to do with these stories? Like, they were amazing stories. But I felt I just didn't know what to do with them. So I knew student papers, that I knew. So, but I didn't have any money, and welfare was $208, and I got $8 back from the owner after the check would be face down on the desk. You signed it back, and he would give you what was left. So I didn't have any money, but I had been married. I got married because to work in a group home, you had to be married. That was one of the reasons. I was straight back then, I think. So I got the paper ready, got it to a printer, but had no money to get it out. Luckily, my ex tracked me down, and he wanted a waiver, like he wanted to marry a Catholic in the Catholic Church, so you got to have like an annulment. So he said, I need an annulment. So I said, okay, you get my paper out of the printing office, and I will sign, to meet with these weirdos that were going to do the annulment. So, and I wanted a chessboard too. So I got the chessboard and the paper, and that was the first issue. I was smart enough to know that you send it to the Deputy Minister of Health, and because they're very narrow-minded. So when they see something, they think, oh my God, everybody's got it. And we only had about 300 maybe issues, but very well placed. And the Globe picked it up, and the Star picked it up, and it started a whole series of articles, Mental Patients Nowhere to Go.
So what date is this again?
Oh, I'm very bad at dates, but it would be after 79.
Right.
Leading right through to Larry Grossman's tenure as Minister of Health, as we brought him into the boarding home to see it.
So the Cuckoo's Nest starts before Phoenix Rising, right? Then?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
And it's
very
separate.
local. Yeah,
it's very local. It's very Parkdale.
It's about housing. It's about the deaths in the hospital. Because by that time, I'd started to get allies amongst the professionals. So I would know a little bit later, let's say, when I was working here downstairs.
Okay. And how long did you put the Cuckoo's Nest up for, do you think?
Maybe 6 years, off and on.
Okay, yeah.
So, but when we started to get the names of the dead, because the hospital had this really cool thing they would do, if you were going to die, they would shift you off to St. Joe's, so you wouldn't show up as dying there. Right? So, but we would put the middle page, the centerfold would always be these names of all the people that died, and stuff like that. That would be quite dramatic. We had a picture of a nest with little birds in it, and talking about the institutionalization, talking about people being forced into studies, drug studies and stuff like that. It was fun, and we had help from some of the nurses at Archway.
The nurses at Archway.
Yeah, it's Satellite and Queen Street.
Okay.
Yeah, and the head of it. I'd gone when I first left the boarding home. Not left, but walked out. Took me a long time to walk around the neighborhood, maybe 2 years or so. So I saw these signs, about, So I went in and I said, can I use your typewriters? That was before computers, because you can't put out a paper without typewriters. So the lady there, Ann Harris, who's deceased now, but was a great woman, she was running at Archway, and she said, absolutely. And it was really, really cool. So that's how we got the paper set up, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to do it. And I have no idea how we paid for the other ones. I have no idea, but they came out, so. Yeah.
So how did you find out about people dying? So the nurses told you?
We had, we had access to. It killed the government. It killed the government. This was later, but we also had Cuckoo's Nest cable. So we got McLean Hunter locally. It was Willie John, and he trained our guys in production and in camera work and in lighting. So we had Cuckoo's Nest cable, right? And we would have ministry people on, and we would talk about compulsory sterilization, all kinds of issues like that. It was really cool. But they couldn't figure out how we're getting the names. But there's kind of like status reports every night, and we would get, somebody would get me those kind of status reports every night, so I would see.
So I don't want, I know you won't be wanting to name the names of the nurses, but who were
Anne
the
Harris
other?
was great. She's dead, so that's
Yeah, so
it.
she's safe.
Yeah.
So what about the other psychiatric survivors?
I had to show that, because there was a lot of fear, and justifiable, that if you did anything, if you complained about your home, they would take you back into hospital, or you would be cut off welfare, or, you know. So I had to show that I could do these things and nobody would get me. So it was, you know, going first. That's a principle of leadership that I teach, that you got to go first, you got to show. So when they saw that I was still, like in the early days, trying to get guys downstairs at Park to talk to reporters was impossible, right? It was just, now after you go a few times, we couldn't shut them up, you know. But you had to show that you could do it and not get killed.
Right.
You could talk
So
to me.
the Cuckoo's Nest, but some of the guys from the
boarding home
boarding
and from Park, yeah.
helped you with it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And the drawings, the cover drawings were all done. We had, there was, can't remember the name of the drug, but there was a, almost like heroin drug, that, like, we had doctors with, in the neighborhood with bouncers in their waiting rooms, because they were just prescribing crap, right, like narcotics. So they'd have a lot of people coming in, and so we had an article about that. One of the guys did that. We had a guy writing about the pressure he was under. He didn't want to be part of this study and how it got yelled at. We had some creative writing kinds of stuff, not, you know, earth-shattering, but pretty good. And we had sometimes, like when they tried to get rid of the lady from Archway because they suspected she was one of our sources, we had a whole thing on that as well. So talk about boarding homes, we talk about stuff like that. Yeah. It was fun. It was a good way to organize. And when I was working at Park, it got easier because I never knew how to collate the pages properly. You know, when you run them off, it has to be page 2. I said, yeah, so it was always really complicated. I wasn't very good at that.
Well, you wouldn't understand, but it's Gestetner.
Kind of thing, yeah, it's very weird. But people took pride in seeing their stuff, as they should. Frank Farkas was one of the guys who wrote for us, and I met his niece downstairs on one of my books was doing one of the books, and she came up and said, "I think you know my uncle." It was really good to know that he was still good and safe. It was nice.
So was the Cuckoo's Nest entirely run, you know, like written and illustrated and everything by people who'd been patients within the system?
And friendly staff.
And friendly staff, okay.
Who took an incredible risk.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, and they wrote too then?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
They were excused from signing their names though.
Yeah, yeah. So were they mostly nurses?
Yeah.
Not social workers?
No.
Okay.
No, there was, I'm just asking myself, I don't think there was ever, although, no, he wasn't a social worker.
Doctors?
Never a doctor.
Never doctor. I just thought.
But people that worked in the bulk rehab stuff, they would give us calls. You know, it was supposed to be anonymous, but I always knew who it was. But mostly it was nurses who took big risks.
Okay. So tell me about Park, because you just started talking
Yes.
about Park, but that's another piece, right?
Park, when I moved out of the boarding home, I think I was moving up here somewhere, and I was walking past this building, deadly poor, still on welfare, eh? Really poor. I saw they were cooking something, and I was hungry, but I didn't want to say that I was hungry. So I walked past and walked in, I think at some point. Paul Quinn, who was working there then. He just started, actually he came because he'd seen the cuckoo's nest and thought this must be a great place to work if cuckoo's nest is coming out of here. He'd gotten confused about where it came from. So I walked in, applied for a job, not that day, I applied for a job, was refused because I was crazy. And the woman who refused me was stupid enough to say that I was refused because I was crazy, and a political crazy to boot. So Paul told them that if they did that again, he would take the staff and they would walk. So I got the job and became the only crazy on staff. There was 5 people on staff then. And worked there for the next 7 years. And always allowed, even though they punished us by limiting our funding, they were buggers. Paul always said, you got to do what you have to do, because he believed in what I was doing, and he believed that it was important. So even if it affected the fact that our budget was not great.
So this was your first waged
After coming to Toronto, yeah.
And what was your job?
I was a community worker downstairs, just doing what people do. Yeah, it was interesting because I think Catherine Church in her articles talk about the duality, the double voice. So you see things from a staff view, but you also see things from a client view. So the people that I would be smoking dope with at Shannon Court, I'd have to kick out for smoking dope in Park. So, and because you feel awkward about this, you get more fascistic as a staff. I was a tougher staff than almost anybody else in there. But I could watch how Paul Quinn interacted, and he was totally ego-free. Like he didn't have those issues. So I learned to relax a bit and not to be so role-oriented and stuff like that. But 7 years is a long time to work in a place like
So you were the first crazy
Stop.
in that park, and then afterwards that. So you were, but then they hired more people that had been part of the
Not
system.
for 7 years.
Not for 7 years.
No, I was the only one. So we're a fairly recent development, and they still have to divest the drop into the members' hands. We will see when that happens. It took a long time. Even the principle about, people would laugh and say, oh yeah, you want the crazies to run the asylum. It was a big joke. Not a big joke now.
Yeah, yeah. And that kind of was your role, the token crazy person, right?
Not a token.
Not a token,
No.
but you were the crazy person.
I was a token on the Supportive Housing Coalition.
Okay.
And that's again what I teach in leadership is if you're going to be a token, use it, because there's power in being a token. There was 2 of us. We're never invited to the first meeting, but the second meeting of the Supportive Housing Coalition, now Mainstay. And they were trying to develop supportive housing for, because it was getting in the news, all the fires and homeless. It was all agencies though, right? So I made the move from First Canada Place. They were having meetings at First Canada Place where, panoramic views, carpets up to your knees. And I said, no, can't talk about poverty here. Come to Park, right? So they stayed, and they resented meeting at Park, as they should. There were mice and everything down there. And they resented me. So they were setting up a meeting with Larry Grossman as Minister of Health. And it was the old boys who said, oh yeah, we'll go and we'll report back. So I said to Mel, who was the other crazy on it, let's go. We're walking. And we got as far as the door, and they said, okay, Pat, you can come too, right? So we went to La Scala to meet with Larry Grossman. Private room, 2nd floor of the restaurant. And they gave cigars out after the meal. It was really bizarre. And Larry said he would come the next day. Would I take him around? I took him to Shannon Court, took him to my boarding home.
So so this is, I was trying to get a
really
map of all the things you've been involved with. So when do you get involved with?
It was 80s. It was 80s. I'm really, really bad, but it was...
Yeah, don't worry. I mean, I can find out.
When he was Minister of
Yeah,
Health.
yeah.
There are articles about everything was... he told me, Larry Grossman told me, little bugger, he told me, don't bring any press. I said, okay, and you don't screw people when they tell you that. So, but he brought Adam Vaughn's father, Colin Vaughn, who was at City TV with a camera. So it's like, what, you brought yours? So we're in the second floor in one of the rooms, and it was really like appalling to look at. And Colin goes, "So Larry, how can these conditions be like this?" And he puts the mic at Larry's mouth, and Larry said, "Hey, we had an agreement." And Colin says, "We had no agreement like this." It was really cool. So I gathered from Ted Ball, who was working from Larry, that Larry went back to his office and screamed at people, "How the hell did this happen? Where this, you know?" Because they knew, like one tinderbox would go, phew, and the lives of 70 people would be wiped out. Right? So that was a very, it was lovely though to see our guys being able to speak, to put a face on who's doing this to me. You know, it was really cool, and we did that more and more as time went by. So supportive housing, they house people, just it's not good. Mainstay, it's turned into Mainstay, and Mainstay is not an empowering place. I learned from that you know, you put in the rights of the people early and make them really strong, because they kept screwing with me and saying, "Oh, we'll get to that," and they never got to that. But I was young and foolish, so I didn't know that.
So this is probably going to introduce yet another huge topic that, but when did you do you and David Revel did the lunch at City Hall?
Okay, I was working at Parkdale.
Because that's a good one
I
to get.
met David, I forget when I met, probably at City, I was annoyed about something. I went to some committee at City Hall and told them I was going to lead people into City Hall, Queen's Park, and we'd keep warm by burning red tape, and we would go into stores and steal. I mean, I didn't mean any of it, but it got a good piece in the Star and got attention, and David and I hooked up. So the Parkdale, the boarding home lunch, my kid sisters also are crazy, and so downstairs, I mean, it was wide open downstairs before, eh? It's a bit different, it's a lot different now, but it was just like a wide open space, lots of tables, crowded, and so we got like 1 can of chunky soup and a big pot, and just put 1 can in, and then the rest water, right? And then we took 99 cents for 1 million tea bags, and like tore them and put them in the thing. We took that dreadful lunch meat with olives in it and weird shit, and we left that out with the bread. We left that bread out so it would get hard. And I did a French menu, right? So it would, vin dans un sac brun, sandwiches avec saucisson de moutarde. My boarding home operator used to say, no, you don't put that. You take the margarine and you just the essence of it, so you don't quite touch the bread with the, it was right.
White bread.
So yeah. So we had this really fine French menu, and went to the mayor and politicians and stuff like that.
So you took you took the lunch to City Hall?
Yeah. And so we made them line up outside the committee room. I think it was the big committee room for. And my kid sister played that boarding home operator, walking up and down, yelling at people, abusing people, which is what happened. We had a religious lady. She was some kind of minister. She played the pharmaceutical person. She had a white coat. She was handing out Smarties at the plate, just taking medication orders and putting those things down. Our guys were serving, the park guys were serving, and they wore T-shirts like that stopped here, and their bellies would hang over, splashing people in the mayor and stuff like that as they went through. So yeah, it was kind of fun.
Do you remember what year that was?
No, David will though.
David will. We are going to interview David, so we'll get him to tell.
I'm really bad at time.
So what about the Gerstein Center?
Okay, the Gerstein Center. See, after the Supportive Housing Coalition, I was kind of burned with these assholes, these professional assholes, and they were assholes. So when I would bring something up, I would literally get shouted down. I took Paul said, Paul, you got to come. You got to see what they do. You know, it's like really horrible. And I would say something like, we need more frontline people at this table. They'd say, what are you saying? Are you saying that executive director scale? It was like harsh, eh? So somebody from City TV, Jeff Hansel, called me and said, there's an announcement. Mayor Eglinton is going to make an announcement today about a task force on discharged psychiatric patients. Want to come? I said, sure. You know, they wanted a negative comment. So I wrote down with him. And this lady's there. And she's a really good friend now. But then I thought, holy fuck, who's this woman? What am I going to do with this? How is she going to relate? What are they doing to us, putting this person in charge? And I may have said something to that effect, and David set up a meeting with her and me at City Hall. And I went in, and it was just her and me. So I agreed to sit on her advisory committee. But I was like really jaundiced, but every time I would come back to Park and say, Paul, there's something really weird at these meetings. I talk, they listen. They don't shut me up. They're listening. There's something really weird here. And it just got more and more like that. Like, you know, I was on the hiring committee for staffing. I was on the architect. I know nothing about architecture, but like architecture committee, what we were going to do. I got more and more fond of Riva, and because she was producing for us, eh? And we got the bloody building. So I got Paul, because they were saying the first round of applications for executive director didn't produce anybody good. Then they say, well, we have to increase the salary for it. And I thought, oh God, it's going to be just like every other agency in this. So I said to Paul, look, let's get two of you. You know, the community experience that Paul had, and someone from the hospital sector, to both like co-directors, so that we would avoid having an emperor at the Gerstein. And they went for that, and they hired Paul and this other lady who didn't work out really well. She was from the hospital sector. David will remember her name. I should remember her name, but I don't. And because we wanted a flat organization, because I already knew that if staff don't feel empowered, the clients don't stand a chance, right? Because nobody's going to give up the little bit of power they think they have to. So I wanted a flat organization, and I knew Paul was not an ego-driven guy. If you go to the Gerstein now, you'll see that the smallest, shabbiest office is his, right? Victor worked there for a long time. Gave them, your father though, I did not hire your father. I don't know how he snuck in, but I really liked that. So he said, fix the schedules, you know, you guys fix the schedule. We hired 20 staff immediately, because we had no staff. We have 2 training programs, one for multicultural, one for crazy. Because even though we have all else being equal, if you're crazy, you get the job. A lot of our guys don't have a chance at that equality. So a year being paid really good to learn how to be a crisis worker and then get placed in the system or at Gerstein itself, which was good. So Riva let all this happen, and I just at her house a couple of weeks ago. She's her sons, because they know that this is the greatest thing. She says that this is the greatest thing she's done in her life, and she's done some amazing stuff in her life. Her sons gave $10,000 apiece for 10 years for survivor projects, so that you know, we're supporting people who want to. Linda Chamberlain, who for people who have to go into hospital but they have pets, so pet fostering. A woman who's doing a documentary on emergency and how it feels to be crazy in emergency. We have the Peacock Poverty. It's an online magazine by poor people, for poor people. So we get to do that. It's all kind of fun.
So you started off with making connections in Parkdale, and then you make connections across the city.
It started off trying to figure out who was responsible. So I would go to the city, I would go to these meetings, and they would say, yeah, we have the right to shut down, you know, on health or physical standards. But if we do that, people will have nowhere to go. So you got to talk to the province. So you go to the province would say, it's up to the city to enforce their regulations. So it's like being a ping pong ball. You couldn't get, using media as pressure points was very useful. And that was, Dorothy Lipovenko did some amazing articles for the Globe, and the Star was always on board. And just kept pushing.
Who
At
was
the same time,
who was at the Star that was supportive?
Joey was later. Joey Slinger was later. I
Yeah.
have to look at the archives, but then both papers were really good. The Globe and the Star. We didn't have the Post back then, but we had an amazing. Actually, it got really scary for me because. So I'd have a reporter coming out, and that day there would be a fire in the boarding home, and I'd think, okay, this is scary, and I don't want things happening just because, But I learned, you don't, and again, this is what I teach, you don't lie to reporters, you put them there and you have confidence in your story. You take them into, okay, I remember Betty Jane Wiley, who's a playwright and stuff like that. I snuck her into a boarding home for the Star. She did a 10-week series, something like Life in the Pits or something like that. So she, I grind her down, because she's one of those women who can wear stuff and look good in anything. So I had to really work on it to get her. And she went in there. She was really scared. So she would come to my place every day to eat a green pepper because she wasn't getting any vitamins and stuff like that, and she would go, and she was sleeping with these women, one of whom was hooking at night and stuff like that. But it was a really good series. It was a good series. We did that.
And then I've got a video clip of
Jojo Chinto?
Yes.
Yes, that was later. I won $5 from Paul. So Jojo Chinto, and he's a big dude and scary dude, and boarding home operators don't like scary dudes. So we had to Uncle Tom him down to look like he was okay. So it was a lot of Ford Aquabelva over him, and then put the bottle in because guys were drinking that. So put the bottle in his thing. From Archway, got a fake prescription form and some pill bottles. He got the money from City TV, because to pay the rent. My dog chewed up his shoes, so that it looked, we tore his coat pocket a bit. I will tell you something, but it can't be if you want to turn that off for a second. TV, he drank a couple of glasses of wine to get the medicated, watery look. His cameraman, who's a really sweet guy, became his brother, and and took him to the boarding house. And it was the worst boarding house owner that we had in Toronto at the time, and that's really bad, to be the worst. His name was Hector Guillemette. He was a son of a bitch, and physical with the guys, like very physical. There's like blood on the walls at head level and shit like that. And the women, I don't know if you saw that excerpt, but women would say, yeah, he pays me for sex, but then he takes it out of my check at the end of the month and stuff like that, right? So it was really good, but Jojo was scared too.
So he was the second person that you helped set up, and so this woman you set up earlier.
Betty Jane Wiley.
And then was that filmed, or did she just write?
She was a 10-piece in the Star. 10-piece series in the Star.
Okay. Yeah.
Interesting, eh? It was fun.
Well, it gives me an interesting sense of the movement, right? How you push.
Well, I was lucky too, because a guy came downstairs, and apparently I was really rude to him, and called him a voyeur, Hume Cronin. He comes from Wealth. I didn't know what the hell he was doing there, but I remember yelling at him a couple of times, because he thought people should be allowed to commit suicide if they were, or something.
So was that here at Park?
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he's like volunteering, eh? And he said, so we started writing. He's a poet, and we started meeting like about once a month, and then his wife gave us her mother's cottage in Muskoka in winter for a month, just to write. And it was like one whole wall was like just glass, Like Bob Rose that works here was saying, oh, it's a shack, you know, and they brought pictures of this falling down place like that. It was a stunning place. Fireplace, green leather couch, that's what I wrote on. And we brought the electric typewriters, and Hume worked on his project in the afternoon. I worked on mine in the morning, because of naturalism and rhythm, and then we'd read each other's work in evening and critique for a month. I wrote most of Upstairs in the Crazy House there.
It's so
92.
fascinating, right? So I was cribbing yesterday on the way up to York, where I teach, and reading it on the subway, and I can see this guy like glimpsing at what he's scanning to see what I'm reading, and then he makes like a connect, right? And he recognizes it's such a well-known book, right?
Really?
And
I
so,
only have one copy of that book. It is so irritating.
I've got one copy.
David Neville said he's
and
bought
you
every second-hand one.
And you can't have it. But what motivated you to write that book?
I was afraid to take time off to do the writing, because being a neurotic, I felt personally responsible all the time that things weren't moving fast. So, and there were people dying all the time, right? So it's like, I'd take it like, oh, I haven't done this or I haven't done that, and it was a lot of weight to carry, which I didn't need to carry, but it's part of neurosis, right? And I just felt like I wasn't working hard enough, and the idea of taking a month off, you know, who would be left when I came back, sort of like that, and it was hard, but I was really encouraged to go.
So you wrote it up at this cottage in the Muskoka?
Almost the whole thing, except for
in a month?
Yeah, except for stuff in my family. So I was very clever. Remember I told you at the boarding home, people would come and they would tell me this, and it had a beginning and it had an ending, and I thought, what the hell am I going to do with this, right? So what I did up there was I made a list of all the things that were burning right here, like right in the front of your head, like Anna, the 80-year-old lawyer's assistant, like Jerry, like the things that were right there. So I made a list, and then I would take the first on the top, and I would write a vignette like out of that, and then the second one, then the third, right? So then I had, by the time we left there, then I ran into June Colwood, because one of the ladies, the only support actually I had on the Supportive Housing Coalition was this lady, Margaret Fraser, who worked at Nellie's as a volunteer. Yeah. Lovely, lovely woman. And she got cancer, and she was dying and didn't have people to take care of her, and didn't want to be in hospital. So I did Friday nights and Saturdays.
There's an amazing book.
12 Weeks in Spring.
June Colwood wrote the book. Yeah.
So I didn't meet June during that thing, but people would, like, we had notes that we would leave. And then there was the wake at Trinity Church behind the Eaton Center. And so June came to interview me at Park, on the second floor at Park. We'd just gotten the second floor, I think, for the book 12 Weeks in Spring. Mm-hmm. And she said, we're simpatico, you and me, and like, we became friends. And a while later I said, would you read this? And she did, and she sent it to, she got me an agent, Bev Slopin, Joe Slinger at the Star. That was a little later. So I get this call from Penguin. They were out on the highway then, and they said, will you come and talk to us? And at first I didn't know how the hell I was going to get there. And I knew they wanted to see how crazy I was, because you can't sell a book if you're too crazy. So I brought a lot of the clippings from the Star and the Globe. And Barb Fichette, that's the lady who worked as co-director at Gerstein, drove me out there and waited in the parking lot when I went in, and I was interviewed by the publisher and the editor, Meg Masters. The publisher, Cynthia Good, who's my best friend now. They were playing hardball. Well, we can't give you, an advance because you're new, and we don't, But you have to put everything in. People have to see it from your eyes, and they got to know who you are. And you've told people's stories very well, but where is your story? I had to write my story, which was really hard, and it wasn't in Muskoka, it was downtown here in Toronto. But write the pieces like family pieces. Mm-hmm. And that, they said they didn't know why it was working, but it was working. So then they published it. And June came up with the title. It was really cool. But you know what's funny? The people on the Supportive Housing Coalition, because it was like 2 years coming out, I would say, I have this book coming out. And they pat me on the head and they, oh yes, of course you do. Just a crazy person. So I was really glad when it finally came out. And we had the launch here at Park.
And do you remember what year that was when it came out?
92 or 95.
Right.
We had Brown Sugar playing with, oh God, I can't remember her name. It's great music, and it was very cool. I'd been appointed to the Clark Institute board that year, so it was NDP government, because that's the only way I would have got on the Clark board. The only crazy on the, well, only official crazy. I don't know how many others were there. So they appointed me to that because we left the board meeting, and Paul Garfinkel had to come to the launch, which I'm sure he didn't enjoy at all. It was kind of fun. My publisher said it was the only launch he's ever been where people are actually sitting around reading the book. You know, mostly the members to see, you know, it was very cool.
It's a very cool book. And then you published, and that was just your first book.
That was the first one.
Yeah.
And then when Harris got elected, that was 95. So the first one must have been 92. 95 was Dispatches from the Poverty Line. That's when I was flung into serious poverty again. So that was 95. I left here after 7 years because I knew, first I was going crazy here. You just, you know, the constant. I mean, you get a lot back, but it's also, it's so discouraging. So I was outside in the alcove outside the front door. This poor son of a bitch from the Atlantic provinces had gotten the shit kicked out of him. His eye was like almost hanging on his cheek, and he was, it was so distressing, and there were people still after him. I was sitting out there with him on a Saturday night, and people were walking by glaring at us, and it was just, I knew that was it for me. It just, so that when I started doing leadership training around the province, I was given, I showed this lady, the community mental health was just forming, at the beginning. Bev Lever, very good to our community. I met up with her, went on a tour of boarding homes with some professionals who were, but Bev listened to me, and when we came out of the tour, she said, you set your salary, and you go around and you get people to fight, you know, essentially. So I worked like for 4 years, going around the province, working with groups of crazies, putting them in a hotel, going into a region, bringing them into a hotel for 3 days, and learning how to do this, learning how to get them up and fighting. It was so lovely. I did that for 4 years.
Right. And then the Harris government came in. No, and then you were on the patient's advocacy.
I did as co-chair of the patient advocate office. So we had advocates in each of the 10 hospitals. I was appointed at the beginning to that. Boy, a lot of resistance, eh? A lot of resistance. I kept saying, you can't do one-on-one. You got to teach people in groups what their rights are, because otherwise you'll be in business forever, and we'll always not know what our rights are. So we had, oh my God. But Bob Buckingham and Ruth Gallup is a nurse scientist, Bob is ushering. They supported me all the way. It was really, it was really good, but it was a hard place to be. Clashed with Dave Recorder, who was in charge of the institution branch. He hated me, mostly because of the newspaper articles, and it cost me a program. If that was before leadership, David and I had come up with this thing, kind of a preliminary to do leadership, and that was killed. I was told I had a choice. I was protecting Ann Harris, that they were trying to fire her at Archway, and I was fighting that. And a lady brought me the message, it's one or the other. And I was so afraid I was going to sell out. I had to immediately call them and say, it's the other. So leadership was put off for a few years. They punished me. But what can you do? You have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror, right? You can't start an advocacy program by selling out. That was like a ridiculous choice.
So what have I missed? What have I not asked you about?
Okay, so we had for a while, we had a provincial crazy organization. As the heads, some of the heads were more into fighting the hospital. For me, it was always, you know, the fight isn't so much located in the hospital anymore. Our fight is out in the community where we spend our time.
Sorry, is it OPSU?
OPSA.
OPSA.
Oh, don't say OPSU. Yeah, but no,
Sorry,
OPSA.
a local.
Ontario Psychiatric Survival
Yeah.
Alliance. We did some good shit and mutual training. I didn't join them. I was more like a facilitator for them, right?
Right.
But I got so annoyed. Like, they do stupid things like drop acid or like really stupid things, and it's like, come on, you know, you have to remember what we're about. We have to remember what we're doing. But we had some good.
So you were involved, but not a part of the
No,
core
I didn't
group
ever want to
on
be in the sandbox. I wanted to be out of the sandbox and a little bit to the side, so that I'd be like somebody that people could come to, whatever they were doing, they could come to me like that. Sort of like a grandmother or something like that, right? But if you're in there and not good, you become partisan, really.
Well, what seems to me is that a lot of your involvement, though I don't want to say token, but that you've been consistently part of groups that are psych survivors and community people,
Yep.
right, and professional psych. So, which is interesting.
Well,
Seems
it's
like
also I continue that. Lately, not lately, but when with Harris and after Harris, I began to understand the role poverty plays and how poverty, the symptoms of extreme poverty mimic mental illness, and how that keeps us crazy, right? Because I was going crazy before. At the same time, my publisher started sending me places like across Canada, looking at inner city poverty, and I'd see agencies, and every agency was blowing their own horn and talking about how wonderful they were doing. By the time I got to Newfoundland, I thought, if one more fucking worker tells me, you know, that they have the best day. So I had to remember my own stupidity here in Park. You know, oh, we're the best. We take the hardest people. You know, if everything was working that well, there wouldn't be that many poor people. Like we gotta, you know. So the more distant, the more clear the view I found. I've always, even as a hippie in the 60s, I couldn't call cops pigs, because it's like, it's doing to other people what's been done to you. You know, so I always want to give people a chance, like, so working with the nurses who were risking their jobs, really. And at the Clark too, people like risking their jobs talking to me. At inquests, you know, I was an expert, and that's a good tool too. Expert witness on aftercare and housing at inquests. So with Reva would go, I would go and talk, and you also saw all the crap in, you know, there was a lovely, Margaret Milton was one of the greatest coroners. She was a riot. So I was there so much that the staff of the place would open up the bottle of scotch at Christmas, and we'd, you know, knock back a few. That's how much I was there, learning about what the limits of inquests are and stuff like that. So I went that route as well, all to try to push change. But even now, I joined 25 and 5, which is 25% reduction in poverty for 5 years. Joining that, which is all, they didn't have one person with lived experience. So I pushed my way onto that. Because of that, Voices from the Street is punching way beyond their weight category. We have access to ministers, we have access to change agents, we've influenced how 25 and 5 goes about their business. So because we've been colonized, as Catholic Church says, they have all the resources, we got to kick ass and get in there so that we can at least take some of those resources and run with them. The benefit too is we're funded by the Atkins. We're funded by guys who used to own the Toronto Star, right? So went and met with Charles Pascal, with our guys, and said, we want to do this program called Voices from the Street. We want to pay poor people to come to a 12-week program to learn how to do policy, how to do leadership. And they said, oh, what a wonderful idea. And they're still funding us. I went to the Toronto Star and met with the head of the editorial board, a really nice guy, Ian Urquhart. He said, you know, when poor people are profiled in the Star, it's never how really they want to be seen, it's how the reporter sees them. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have poor people writing about? He said, sure, you don't have to sell me. So our People's Panel has 4 to 6 op-eds that we're going to be writing. They're going to be writing, and they're going in the Star, and it's their stories told their way. It's like, it's the Star, right? So sometimes I just shake my head and think, oh, this is good. We are making real progress here. And in other ways, of course, we're getting screwed, but it's like sometimes you take a chance. I work with cops. You know, people think I'm nuts. Well, I am, but but even engaging with government, people say, how can you engage? How can you not? How can you bring change if you're not actually talking to people? How can, you know, if I want to just talk to myself, I'll never get change. If I limit myself to talking on Rabble or something like that, I'm just talking to people who think sort of like me. You got to reach out to the people who don't think like you. And that has been really successful, I think, in terms of getting people on side. Because we need help. We have no resources. We have like such a limited, even Penguin kept me for years. For years. Like, that's amazing. They suggested every book that I wrote. Mm-hmm. They suggest, except the first. They would say, why don't you do this? I would stay in the nicest hotels. Like the guy who was who had set up the tour, he's vice president of Random House now. It was like I'd go into these hotels and I'd be afraid to touch anything because they were all brass. And I loved that the house coats, and downstairs you could get omelets made and shit like that. Like, it was really,
I like the swimming
really
pools.
good.
So
not me, I don't. I drown.
So, can you just tell, just because we have this opportunity and we're interviewing you, can you just describe a bit of that boarding house system and the lives of people in those early boarding houses? So they start moving people out of the institutions,
giving them a bus ticket and an address
and a prescription.
Yes, the
yes.
prescriptions were.
So they give them a bus ticket and an address to go to.
And usually an appointment slip, which would get lost really quickly. There were no calendars or clocks in the building. So you never knew. There was one day, and that was check day. That was the day, right? And that came and went so damn fast. And the rest of the month was like, But you get used to anything, is that. I work now with guys in a supportive housing place, which I have to be vague about because it's contractual. But they have 500 psych survivors living in different residences, supportive housing residences. I've also worked with the guys at Habitat, which is paying private operators to have one less person in their bedrooms, or putting up. It's really ridiculous. But again and again, we hear from people that the worst thing is the shared accommodation, the hardest thing.
And in those early boarding houses,
it was pushed. It was to the rafters, like just to the rafters. My operator side would because there was nobody there. There was no staff, right? No staff. So he would say to me, "Oh, if there's a problem, I'm psychic. I would know, and I would be there in 20 minutes." He would say. Well, he wasn't psychic, and he wasn't there in 20 minutes. So, people were raped in that house. The old lady, Anna, who was so afraid of dying alone, that's what happened to her. She died alone, Nobody there.
And these were old, large buildings in the Parkdale area.
They looked nice from the outside, right?
And they were, so every room, every bedroom.
Carved up, totally carved up. And you'd have like beds of all different sizes, walls that, chunks falling from the ceiling, and fists put through the walls. My room, even though I was very fortunate
you
to
had your own
my
room.
he thought I'd run away from my marriage or something like that, because that's what he told me after. So, and he, I guess.
So how big was your room?
It was tiny, but I'm institutionalized. I still live in a room. It was small, but the walls, because they'd been plastered over so much, were, if you've seen the movie Repulsion, where hands reach out in the walls, it's kind of like that. It was puke yellow, and there was like small windows cracked, attic-style windows cracked. It was freezing, but there was a sink. I think there was a sink, and there was like a metal frame bed with the weirdest mattress, like it was lumpy. And I had brought a knife because I thought that I'm going to kill myself, of course. You always have to have an exit. I keep that under my pillow. And it had a eye hook. I don't know what they're called, but you know, like, yeah, that was the lock. Fuck. Which you just, with a comb, you could just, they showed me, the guy showed me how.
So there was no, and so no personal, you didn't have personal stuff?
I didn't have any clothes even. I'm not quite sure how that came about, but I had my jeans and a couple of shirts. Because when the lice outbreak came, when I was washing some of the ladies, I got the lice and had nothing to change into. It's really, you know, that's fun.
So when you left the hospital, you just left with the clothes you were wearing then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was, I don't know why, but yeah.
Yeah.
The and in the hospital, you put on weight, of course. So I hardly ate. I wanted to lose that weight. Or it was just a way of having some control, I'm not sure. I was also dead. Okay, so 1241, 43 were a joint. It was weird. 1245 was where the dining room was. And on the first floor was where the food was, right? So, and the guy, Clayton, that would run it, he was an old alky, and he was a miserable son of a bitch racist too. Like, it's just, he liked me, unfortunately, but he was really a prick. And there was a guy, Tony, who played classical piano, who had been a child prodigy, and probably had a schizophrenic break. I could never finish anything because there was a piano in the basement. Clayton had these dreams for him, and it was really weird. And Frida, who was a nice lady, she's the one who wanted to know how you knew if you were divorced or not. She was illiterate. So the guy, the owner, would write down names on scraps of paper where he'd twist the medication, because he had a lot of the medication, and she would give it up, but she didn't read the names, and she didn't know the names, so it was kind of fun, whatever you got.
So the owner in these boarding houses, the owner would be in charge of your welfare check or whatever.
Yeah, or there was, you know, you didn't have a right to get your own mail.
Yeah, and you didn't have
one mailbox with a key.
And he or she would also be responsible for dealing with your medication.
Yeah, they shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
But you didn't have any rights. So I mean, we had a right to but we didn't know those rights. I was on the extension of the Landlord-Tenant Act to roomers, boarders, and lodgers. I sat on that task force for Alvin Curling when he was Minister of Housing. So we did get an extension. But you know who fought it? The professionals fought it because they didn't want us to have the right to tenant security, you know, God forbid. How do you know we'll never get rid of them or something like that? So, but you didn't really have rights because I remember when our house was sold, our boarding house was sold to two bankers and a teacher. They'd done stuff before. And right away they upped the rent, So I took his first outing that I think the guys in the house had, walked him over to Parkdale Legal. Right. Said, look, there guys, you know. So Parkdale Legal, even though we weren't technically covered yet, they did this official looking letter telling them, no, you can't do that, you know, you have to have 3 months notice. So it was a victory. You always have to win the first one. It was a victory, and the guys had got to keep their money for at least another 3 months. That was kind of fun. I like that. Parkdale Legal is a good place.
So these places and the food was
obviously. Oh God! The funniest thing was a box of macaroni, because we'd go to I'd go with the owner to Usher's, which was the mystery cans. It's like cans with no label or that got squished. So and there's another place where the pigeons would be flying. I forget what one that was. And he'd also pick up any when cash register receipts, you'd pick those up, I guess, for income tax, like it is. So you get so big boxes of stuff. So this big box of macaroni, I remember being in the kitchen helping with lunch, and I would kick the cupboard to let the mice know that I was coming in. So because it's startling, right? So when I saw the box was kind of moving, and I said, "Sorry, they're eating the spaghetti." He took it out into the back, opened it up so the mice could escape, and then brought the pasta back in.
And was that pretty typical of food?
I suspect so.
And
it was starch.
Yeah. And cheap.
And the antipsychotics then left you ravenous. You're always hungry, always hungry. So the worst was the cereal in the morning, because that was like puffed wheat or shit like that. It seemed like you could never get it off the floor. It was always there. And dinner was unpleasant. I think I described that in Upstairs in the
You did, yeah. Yeah.
Unpleasant. I had more privilege than the other guys in the house. But I also think I had a somewhat more sensitivity in some ways.
So was the owner of that house kind of was it a typical scenario? You said the house was bought by a teacher and two...
That was the second...
yeah, but who were the owners of those places?
Could be anybody. Like Hector was some kind of engineer.
Right.
Elizabeth Fortune she was really horrible. She was a nurse. We had a couple of nurses running homes.
Interesting.
We had, Syed had been an accountant or something. No, yeah, an accountant. And when he said his wife had bought the boarding home, thinking about it like an English boarding home.
Yes.
Not aware that there were,
Mistake.
Yeah.
So, and was that size of that boarding house kind of typical?
Mine was the second largest in Parkdale.
And how many people were approximately?
70. Elizabeth Fortune's house was bigger.
70 people?
70, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, because it was three houses joined together.
Now, when I started to feel like responsible, being erotic, it was trying to keep in touch.
Sorry, but that is a small institution.
It is.
Considering it was supposed to be
and you gotta know, are they alive? Is everybody alive? You gotta know who's there. We had, little fire starters, which I described in the book.
Yeah.
So it's like, you gotta know who's there, otherwise, you gotta be last out. So, but you'd rather know that everybody's out. Oh my God, it got really bad. It got crazy. Just like you're always worried that justifiably so that you can't keep your eyes over 3 buildings. How do you do that? Yeah, like people would come and get me, but still, Jesus. So the park was pretty easy after, it was all on one floor. But it taught me not to take things like, I'm thankful because when I see what happens to nurses or doctors that deal with crazy folks and only see them when they're in crisis and only concentrate on the diagnosis, I got to hear from these guys their lives, their wishes, so they were enormously human and told and taught me and protected me, and it was really, really useful. Do you know what we're doing lately? We have a group called RACI, Residents and Consumer Initiative, and one of our people from Voices from the Street, we teach them to talk or something like that, to do public speaking, and they'd heard one of our guys, and they, two of the residents, first-year residents, they already have their medical degree, but it takes 5 years to be a shrink, approached me and said, we think our curriculum, first-year curriculum, isn't really exhaustive, and maybe we should get together and come up with an underground curriculum. And for me, this was a breakthrough, because U of T and psychiatric, we used to have psychiatrists sit in meetings that the ministry would call, where I was like talking, and the psychiatrist would be so rude, like deliberately so, like to say, this is all busy work, and they just busy themselves like this. So it was like really cool to be approached by them. We've been meeting in each other's houses.
Like an underground school of...
Well, it started out that way. It started out that way, but it's become. It looks like we'll be presenting to the Canadian Psychiatric Association. Like that is huge.
Well, that is.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah, and we're influencing these youngsters who are like lovely, and you know, they'll talk about. So you know, when I'm walking down the corridor, and you know, 2 o'clock in the morning, I start worrying about who I'm going to see when I've been called to emergency. And I said, I remember sitting on the gurney, wondering about who's walking down the hall, who's going to be totally in charge of my life, whether I live or die. When we get to do these kinds of exchanges and this kind of teaching of each other, it's really great.
Yeah. So we've already taken up quite a bit of your time, but I guess I'm just wondering what you think. I mean, you were part of this movement, right?
Yeah.
That comes after they start deinstitutionalizing people.
I never considered myself part of a movement so much as,
Okay.
because I'm a loner, I'm not a joiner.
Yeah.
I like to facilitate groups, but I don't like to join. So my freedom to operate in whatever group is very important to me, and I don't like to report to anybody. And I've been able to do that, to live like that, to work like that, to have people around who respect what I do and who find ways to support it. So, but I'm not a joiner. Yeah.
But in terms of patient empowerment, you were part of a time when patients started to get some
When
empowerment.
I was there about the empowerment councils first started.
Yeah, and just through the housing activism that you did, and helping start the Christine Center, and I mean, to me, that's a significant part of.
And to sit down in Queen Street.
Yeah.
Down Queen Street with social workers, nurses, and outpatients, and getting them to talk to each other. Or that was hard. In group. That was very hard. So that they could start seeing each other as people, eh? And stuff, yeah. So yeah, little things. I remember sitting trying to keep Ann Harris's job. I remember being here's the head of the hospital, Queen Street, and here's me, and we're sitting knee to knee, and we're trying to work this out, because it would embarrass the hospital if we went on strike. What's called strike, but so, and just like this kind of intense bargaining, like that's a lot of power. That's a lot of power to go. But it's also you have responsibility, and you have to keep trying new things, and you have to break. I tell my guys, the worst thing that can happen to you is that you become a 24-hour-a-day person talking politics. Nobody's going to like you. Nobody's going to want to talk to you. You'll only talk to other people who are 24-hour politics. Don't do that. You'll dry up. You'll be useless. Have a life. Have things that you like doing. Use humor. I learned that in Vancouver. I was talking to 500 staff from the Vancouver mental health something or other, and the boss had brought me down, and they were resistant little bastards. The staff resistant to the message of empowerment, and he said to me after that, because they didn't really listen, it was because I used so much humor, right? That they were able to hear me. Whereas in Thunder Bay, early on, I was so pissed off and so angry. I didn't do my job. I didn't do the hearts and minds that I like to try to do, because I just was so mad. And I learned then that you can be right, and it can be righteous, right and righteous, and be totally wrong because you're not doing your job. You're not reaching people. So that was
you have a real gift for telling the story of people's lives, right? And that that reaches people. So is there something that something else?
guess we always have to remember, oh yeah, class. And I don't know why this is. Middle class crazies, as opposed to our guys. Middle class crazies tend to want to fight the system over and over, the same battles over and over. One of the ladies from OPSA, who's a really smart, capable, good writer. So I haven't heard from her for about 6 years, 7 years. And then she sent me this note saying, how are you? Oh, I've been in hospital 6 times this year and 2 times the year before. I thought, fuck, you know, learn about your illness. You know, it's like being at war with your parents all the time. Get a life, find a way. You don't need to be in hospital all the time. Our guys that are poor don't spend their life worrying about that, you know.
So this, I mean, the people in your boarding house, those were poor, crazy people, right?
And most of them are dead.
Yeah, and people that were middle class ended up somewhere else, right?
Oh, for sure. They were creamed up, but are they better off? I don't know. They walk around like I talk to them. I see them sometimes, and it's more like, oh, this illness is so bad. No, it isn't. It really isn't. There's a whole lot worse out there. You know, it's almost like we coddle ourselves, where when you're dirt poor, you can't afford to coddle yourself. Yeah, depression is really bad, and I've had some really interesting, you know, but am I going to go around? I know people who are blind and deaf and who only get to communicate maybe 1 hour a week with their personal service worker. That's heavy, you know? Get some perspective. It seems to me that if you want to stay in battle with the hospital for the rest of your life, that's a conscious choice, and it's avoiding getting on with your life. And it just bugs the shit out of me that people who could do a lot more are still at that level where they're just, oh, they locked me up. Well, sweetheart, you know, if they're locking you up, why don't you look at what your behavior is doing, and why do you want to get locked up? You know, what's the? I think for me, not wanting to be locked up came with the no smoking in the hospital. I thought, fuck, I'm not going to do that, right?
Gotta get out of here.
Yeah. So, but that class thing is really, really interesting.
Yeah, so was Verdun, this is like...
Verdun was the poor crazies.
That's what I thought.
And the
That's
same
what
with Queen Street.
Yeah.
A guy called Mort Mates, who was a friendly psychologist to us, he did a survey early on and showed that it's poor people that go to the provincial hospital as well. And without advocates on welfare, sure. And actually the hospitals used to say that too. Oh, the doctors who aren't smart enough to do private practice, they're the ones that work at Queen Street. They used to say that. They used to say that the patients at Queen Street don't have the insight to benefit from talk therapy.
So the middle class patients went to the Clark.
Oh yeah, for sure. And not a better place for them.
No.
Because that's an evil place in a lot of ways.
No, you were probably just more neglected at Queen Street, right?
But we weren't subjected to one floor where they only use one medication because they're doing a scientific survey. You know, like, God help us. I found that much more scary than Queen Street. I would have chose Queen Street any time over the Clark. Because they get you. I do believe that. It's like C.S. Lewis, some of his writings on Out of the Silent Planet, those books where he talks about
Narnia.
The institution. No, it's
Narnia is my only.
did Narnia.
Yeah,
but it's
I've only read
Paralandra, Out of the Silent Planet, and there's that hideous strength, and he talks about this kind of institute where the head is really a head. It's really a head, and that runs everything, and how people are mentally ill. Mentally ill because there's no cutoff. You can keep them forever, right? And you can experiment forever. As on the board of Clark, I fought like hell on these and made myself enormously unpopular. But again, had allies in bankers and the businessmen that sat around the table, not the shrinks, not the shrinks. That's my life as an advocate.
That was a pretty good life.
It is. I'm very happy.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was,
If anything like occurs to you that you want